Hello there. Glad that you can be with me today. I'm Steve Cole, pastor of the First Methodist Church in Oswego, Kansas, as well as the West Mineral Methodist Church in West Mineral, Kansas, the home of Big Brutus. Today we're going to be doing a little bit of a sermon that takes place a few years after the resurrection. Peter is writing a letter to the people that have kind of moved away, dispersed because of persecution, and he's talking about a little bit of that. So this is from 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 1 to 9. Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ, to the exiles that are of the dispersion in Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia, who have been chosen and destined by God the Father and sanctified by the Spirit to be obedient to Jesus Christ and to be sprinkled with his blood. May grace and peace be yours in abundance. Blessed is God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. By his great mercy we have been given a new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, to an inheritance that is imperishable, undefiled, and unfading, kept in heaven for you, who are being protected by the power of God through faith, for a salvation ready to be revealed in the last time. In this you rejoice, even now for a little while you have had to suffer various trials, so that the genuineness of your faith, being more precious than gold, that though perishable, is tested by fire, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed. Although you have not seen him, you love him, and even though you do not now see him, you believe in him and rejoice with an indescribable and glorious joy, for you are receiving the outcome of your faith, the salvation of your souls. May God add a blessing to the reading and hearing and the understanding of his word. Parts of this passage have been read oftentimes at a committal service at the graveside, especially that part that it tells about an inheritance that is imperishable, undefiled, and unfading, kept for in heaven for you, and that you have receiving the outcome of your faith, the salvation of your souls. I've read that several times at the graveside of someone who's a believer in Jesus Christ, and that's just part of the committal service. But it gives hope to the family about their loved one. I remember a little video clip I saw of a movie where the pastor gets up and he's ready to read about the man that has died. It's at a graveside, and it's out by the ocean on a cliff. He's getting ready, opens up the Bible and has his papers of what he's going to say there in the Bible, and a big gust of wind comes along and phew, off go the papers over the cliff. And evidently he didn't know this man all that well, and he's like, what do I do now? Everything he was going to say was on those pieces of paper. I find that kind of amusing. And that's kind of the reason why I use a 3-ring binder to put what I'm going to say in it. Because we get a little bit of wind here in Kansas, and the same thing could happen to me. It may not go over a cliff, but the papers go wandering off, and I either have to go gather them up real quick. But anyway, that can happen. Now, last week we celebrated Easter. This week we kind of go fast forward a few years after the resurrection. Some of the followers of Jesus have had to go into hiding and have had to go live other places because of persecution. And Peter is writing a letter to them to give them some encouragement and some hope as they deal with this. Nero is the emperor in Rome at this time, and Nero is no friend of Christians. There had been a major fire in Rome, and he blames the Christians for setting the fire. So Christians are getting persecuted for that. It'll be a few hundred years yet before Christianity really catches on and becomes the major religion for the people in that area. So in the meantime, they're dealing with some hardships. And not only did they face that, but there's life then, first century, was not all that easy. It was filled with lots of hard physical labor. There wasn't the health care that we have. There wasn't the certainty of putting your money in the bank and being able to know that it was safe there, or even the things that you had. Disease was not unusual for someone to get sick from disease. It's not unusual for there to be a fire and destroy a home, or other things. Livestock might have a crop failure. All kinds of things. It was not an easy time, and so he talks about as we face various trials, and not only the persecution, but lots of other things that happen in life. Not easy for them to do that. Now, they had persecution. Today we don't really see that so much here in the United States, but in some countries, especially in the Middle East, some parts of Africa and Indonesia, to be a Christian is they're going to be persecuted because they have a hard time in that part of the world. So it is difficult for people in some, but here in the United States, about 70% or so of the people would say they are Christians, and the next largest group is probably those that say they're non-religious, that don't really believe in, not necessarily that they don't believe in God, but they just don't follow an organized religion, which I tell them, hey, we're not that well organized. We'd be glad to have you, but still. We're not really dealing with a lot of acts of terrorism or people that are persecuted for their faith. Once in a while, there's little anti-Semitic things here and there, and with the exception of 9/11, we don't really have it. Most of our trials that we encounter are more in the form of physical and mental illness, natural disasters, drug and alcohol abuse, financial problems, things like this. Those are our trials that we deal with. But these words that were found here in 1 Peter apply to us today just as much as they did then. That we, of course, go through various different trials as we live our lives and the things that we go through. He tells them the hope that they have and puts it in terms of an inheritance. He says, we receive an inheritance that is imperishable, undefiled, and unfading, kept in heaven for you. We might think that back then an inheritance didn't necessarily involve money because they didn't necessarily have a bank that they would put money in. The inheritance involved more than likely property, a home, land, livestock, precious metals like gold and silver, jewels, grain, things like this were what the inheritance someone would receive. But the problem was that property can get run down, or there might be a fire and destroy the home. There might be, the property could get run down, or there could be a blight or a drought. Livestock could get a disease and die. There are all kinds of things that could happen that would affect their inheritance. Somebody might come and steal the precious things that they have, the gold, silver, jewels, whatever. So counting on an inheritance like that was kind of precarious at best. Today we have ways of preserving our things, but still, even that might happen because, a house can get run down and in disrepair. Money might get used up through needs for health care, or in the nursing home somebody might spend several years, and there goes all the money that would be for an inheritance. The point that I think he's trying to make is that we can't count on our earthly inheritance, but we can count on our inheritance that we receive from God. In fact, he tells us we've already received it. We already have it. It's kept in heaven for you. It's already there. We don't have to worry about losing it. Usually someone has to die to get an inheritance. Well, somebody did die. Jesus died, but he rose again. And because of that, we have that inheritance waiting for us in heaven. We can't lose it. It won't go away. No one's going to rewrite the will, right? It's a sure thing. And I've been watching some of the episodes of the old TV show Columbo. Old Columbo drove an old beat-up car and wore a worn-out trench coat, smoked a cigar, but he always seemed to solve the murder, right? And it was amazing how many of the murders that he solved were because of an inheritance. Either somebody wanted to get their inheritance, and so they killed the person that they would inherit from, or they were afraid that person might change the will. And so they wanted to kill them before they got a chance to change the will so they could get their inheritance. That just kind of all involved in there. But despite all the things that we go through, we're told, he says, we have joy. Despite all the trials that we go through, he says, although you have not seen him, you love him. And even though you do not see him now, you believe in him and rejoice in an indescribable and glorious joy. Despite the fact that we go through all these trials, we can have joy. Indescribable joy. Wow. If you watch TV news these days, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of things to be joyful about. Lots of shootings and storms, tornadoes, floods, hurricanes. On top of that, all kinds of political unrest. We say, oh my goodness, isn't there anything good going on in the world? Well, of course, it's all about ratings and what gets people to watch. And they kind of, we might say, sensationalize things sometimes. But, it always seems like at the end of the program, they always find something good. They don't want to get us totally depressed, so they find something good to report on. And we kind of like to have a little bit more of that kind of thing, wouldn't we? But, joy. It says we have joy, despite all these things. Every Sunday when we have the service, I always ask for, we have called joys and concerns. It seems like there's always more concerns than there are joys. But we do have things we can be joyful about, especially this time of year. The weather is wonderful, the spring is coming. We can be joyful about what the weather is like. But we will also be joyful that we have our friends and our family. If we've got our health, that's something we can be joyful about. If we've got a place to live, car to drive, food to eat, clean water. Hey, we compared to a lot of people in a lot of other parts of the world, we have it pretty good. We have a lot that we can be joyful about. But of course, most importantly is we can be joyful that Jesus Christ is our Savior and Lord, that he lives in us, helps us, is there with us despite all the trials that we might go through. Jesus is with us, and we can have joy in our hearts because of that. This also goes along with a story, and part of what he said there. He said, although we have not seen him, you love him, and even though you do not now see him, you believe in him. Right? Don't physically see Jesus, but Jesus is with us, and he's there, and we see the results of what Jesus can do in the lives of other people. But that kind of goes along with what happened that a week after the resurrection. Thomas wasn't there when Jesus first appeared to the disciples. And he said, unless I can see him, unless I can put my hand in his side, I won't believe. Well, of course, a week later, Jesus comes along. And Thomas is there this time. And he says, oh, my Lord and my God. And Jesus says, have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have come to believe. Well, that's us, isn't it? We haven't really seen Jesus physically in that sense, but we see all the results of what Jesus has done. And talks about sometimes the eyes of our heart, that we see things but spiritually in that sense. The passage says, down for a little while you have to suffer various trials. Well, the good thing is that he is with us through those trials. He doesn't keep them from happening, but he's there with us as we go through those trials, and we can look to him to be the one to help us as we go through that. Well, now, thank you for coming, and know that God is with us to guide us, lead us, and help us today and every day. Amen.